Welcome to another edition of Special Report Online. If you haven't been here before, welcome aboard. It's a place where it's more relaxed. You can ask a question or make a comment. Type it in. We will get it. By the way, we are working on changing the comment boxes. They're right under the screen right now, down here. But soon, they will be right next to the screen, and you'll be able to see them simultaneously. Some people say they have opened up another window right now, and they do it that way. I know that's tough to follow, and I don't really follow it, but that's what they told me. Anyway, welcome aboard. Steve, AB, and Charles are still here, and let's talk healthcare because we didn't really finish that conversation. Is there a sense that something's changing up on the Hill with regards to this, AB, that some event is going to happen? Because, you know, we're getting all of these things. Mid-March, you got to get this done. Right. There are these different deadlines, but, you know, it's still chugging along.
Well, there is a real ever-growing panic, obviously, among Democrats who are getting into 2014, closer to the enrollment deadline, closer to the midterm elections this November, and really wondering how long they have left to defend this program or begin to run from it. As Steve pointed out in the broadcast, it is truly devastating for them to be urging the administration to either make fixes or educate the public or do what they can to back them up at home, and then to learn with each passing several weeks that there's a new revelation of potential doom to this March 31 deadline. This is truly remarkable. One of the facts that I really truly can't believe is that most of the people signing up in the exchanges, Bret, are insured people who are already insured. So these uninsured people that this program was supposed to vacuum up have not materialized in the numbers that they're supposed to.
Right, the numbers are like 11% uninsured.
So it's very tough for Democrats right now. And Steve talked about the Democratic office holders who are learning anew that by dumping CGI, one contractor, and hiring another, the administration has admitted that the entire system's in jeopardy. Those people are not eager to answer phone calls right now, I can assure you, because they don't know what to say.
Yeah.
But Republicans, on the other hand, have made an interesting attempt to try to say we are going to address the collapse of Obamacare by either there will be a replacement, as the words that House Speaker John Boehner used. There will be a replacement. When is the big question? Because there's so much a debate between Republicans about whether or not you actually offer an alternative, as Congressman Price talked about here on Center Seat, that is a target for Democratic criticism, or you just sort of watch the thing fall apart. So there will be a lot of proposals floating around. Some of them are actually not comprehensive replacements, but they're good, like trying to stop a bailout, these risk corridors that the law provides in order to make insurers whole should they end up only insuring the sick, risky, and elderly. But nothing is ready for prime time from the Republican or Democratic side.
Yeah, I guess that's where we are. I mean, I used to cover the Pentagon, and when we asked similar questions, briefing after briefing, Secretary Rumsfeld used to say, we've been around that barnyard chasing that chicken. But that's where we are. The Republicans are waiting to see. They're waiting to see. Do you think that they're going to come up with some concrete unity plan before we get to the end of March?
Well, I think they ought to. I think
not that they ought to. Do you think they will?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, who can predict what Republicans are going to do from day to day? It's probably more likely than not, in part because there is, I think, a quiet but growing call for them to actually do something, even if they risk being challenged or having their plan become, distract attention from the ongoing difficulties with Obamacare. At some point, Republicans are going to have to step in because we are seeing increasingly the problems with Obamacare. This is not a problem that's going to go away. It's not a problem that's going to be solved by the patches or the holding back of the implementation of certain laws by the administration. So they're going to have to do this. And I think this is a big moment. I actually do think that this document.
All right, but hold on. But so for the Republicans who turn around and then say, well, wait a second, the onus is not on us. We didn't do this. We said don't do this. We want to repeal the thing. We didn't want to do this from the beginning.
Yeah.
So now that you're saying we are responsible for coming up with the comprehensive solution and Democrats are left What?
No.
That's what Republicans say to me when I ask that question.
I'm glad you asked, because that's not what I'm saying.
I know. That's what they say to me.
The challenge for Republicans is to do everything they can to help people who have been affected by Obamacare in a negative fashion. That's a growing population. It will continue to grow, and to not address that, I think, would be foolish. But at the same time, they've got to do everything they can to not support or add to the longevity of the law itself. It's a difficult balance. It's a huge challenge. But the fact that there are continuing problems that we are seeing, that the administration is now having to own up to, that you're hearing from the CEOs of insurance companies. Mark Bertolini, CEO of Aetna, was on CNBC this morning, gave an interview, and said, in effect, we might have to withdraw from the exchanges. Now, everybody's known that. That's not really anything new. But for him to raise that in public and to say that, he also said that he wasn't confident that after the March 31st deadline, they would know the exact demographic makeup of these groups. It's ironic to me to hear him say that, the head of this major insurance company, when everybody in Washington has been touting these precise demographic numbers the administration gave us, which aren't precise. They're not probably even going to end up being accurate. But you have a CEO of an insurance company saying, we don't know what the mix is. And he raised the prospect of having to when they set rates in May for 2015, looking at the potential of double-digit rate increases. Again, this is something that everybody has known was a possibility, but to hear it out of the mouth of a CEO of a major insurance company is extraordinary.
So I guess the question is, how much longer can the administration continue to put Kathleen Sebelius out walking down a hallway with reporters and microphones and say, everything's fine, the 300 insurers are on board, we're going to get everybody paid, and by the way, the website is working a lot better and everything's just great, I've got to go to this meeting. How much longer does that happen before the thing implodes? Because frankly, compared to the documents that we're seeing, it's almost like you're hearing from Baghdad Bob, that press secretary in Baghdad when Saddam was going down and our tanks were rolling by behind him, and he said, they're not here, they're not here, the Americans are nowhere near the city.
The difference was that at that time, the mainstream media had people who could actually see American tanks entering Baghdad and reported it. They were actually interested in that story. They are not interested in this story, which is why it was, it's so important that it get explained here as it was. And remember, this is not something the administration released willingly. The only reason it released this information is because it had to explain why it went to a sole source contract, no bid contract of a huge amount to Accenture. So it had to show the document that would justify it. And the reason that they had to go there is because they were headed over a cliff because the back end wasn't working, didn't even exist. Look, I think this is something that Republicans ought to not tamper with right now. The idea of presenting a comprehensive alternative plan is insane. And I think one way to explain it is this.
No, wait. Hold on. Why?
And I'm going to tell you why. Reason number one. And the reason they ought to say is, this thing is such a mess. There's so little information. We really don't know who signed up. We have no idea what the subsidies are. We have no idea what the breakdown is. We're getting all this stuff released in these documents. How can we actually have a plan that undoes all that when we have no idea what we're going to be undoing?
Well, then, Charles, what happens is the Democrats say, oh, you don't have a plan? Well, we have a plan, single payer.
Okay, if you want to try to sell single payer to a country that is now reeling under semi-nationalization, give it a shot. So here's an administration that can't even put a website together for 2/3 of $1 billion, and it's going to say, you know what we're going to do now? We're going to entirely take over everything. Doctors are going to be civil servants. Nurses are going to be civil servants. Hospitals are going to be like post offices, and you're going to like that. You know what the chances of that passing? Zero. I think what Republicans ought to do is to establish principles. We're going to try to undo the mess. What we're going to try to do is, number one, tort reform. Number two, you can purchase insurance across state lines. Number three, we're going to increase the opportunity for health service accounts. You can have a whole list of principles, and you say, we're going to redo all this in that way, and I would even add this, we'll look for a discrete way to subsidize the uninsured and help them. And we will take the money from other places, or from the money that we say we're toward reform, for example. Principles, and I wouldn't go anywhere beyond that. And the fact is, we don't know what the mess is going to, for example, if Aetna withdraws and others withdraw, we're going to have to remake the whole system all over again. And how do you undo the 2 supposed million who are in the exchanges now? We don't even know if all of them are in or all of them are not.
No, I mean, a lot of the questions are the 11% uninsured who've signed up, are they really insured now, or are they still uninsured? I mean,
they're not.
Who's to know?
If they hear about the back end, they're going to have a heart attack, because if the insurer has not been paid on that behalf of their supposed policy, they're not insured.
Will they be covered if they have a heart
Indy
attack?
Farmer
That's
writes
the
in,
question.
it looks like the voters are getting the back end. Tort reform with all the lawyers in Congress, I don't know. Carl Casino writes, Patton, Virginia, 2, you go, Charles, please run for office. You know, I get that a lot.
I'll say it again. If nominated, I will not run. But if elected, I'll serve.
There you go.
I'm lazy. I don't want to eat
There's a write-in
chocolate corn dogs at the Iowa State Fair.
Why? They're so good.
There's a write-in campaign on the way. AB, I guess the bottom line question is, a lot of people are asking, how does the administration spend this? What does the State of the Union look like with all of this stuff looking like it's imploding? Or at least it looks like it's imploding when you look at some of the stories that we're doing.
I do not think that President Obama is going to spend his State of the Union addressing the problems of Obamacare. I think you're going to hear about manufacturing policy, promise zones, the extension of unemployment insurance, a raise of the minimum wage, college affordability, college completion rates, college sexual assault, and lots of other stuff before you hear.
Will he mention it? Do you think?
Oh, he's going to mention it. He's going to say, now for the first time, we've heard from Doris in Boston, and Ralph in.
And Ralph happens to have a seat up here in the chamber.
Right, and they're going to tell the stories of people that we've seen in the positive newspaper stories who are so relieved because this dogged them for years and terrified them, that their pre-existing condition. It's a very small percentage. I understand.
And there are those people.
Yeah, and there are those people, and that is a totally real fear, both emotional and financial, that really has ended for them. There are not enough of those people in the balance of the enrollees, some of whom are paying insured people and some of whom are not and don't know it. With the data, the demographics, everything, whether they were previously insured, uninsured, for anyone to make a determination at this point whether or not this is going to succeed, and it doesn't look good, but President Obama, of course, is going to say that that is, we can't go back, that is a new era where everyone has health security, and he's going to move on, and as I said, talk about these other income inequality issues.
If the number is 2.2 million, okay, and 11% of them are uninsured, is it fair to say that we have more uninsured now than we had when we started?
That's 230,000, and we know that 6 million have lost their insurance. I think if you look at the two numbers, you would have to conclude that the newly insured are very small compared to the newly uninsured.
I mean, some people would say that those people who were kicked off plans were accepted on other plans in the same insurance company quickly, blah, 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 blah.
Some of them were, but some
others
of them didn't.
weren't.
Right.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, I get questions all the time. I think we still need to do Healthcare 101 all the time.
I think it's great. I think you can never do too much Healthcare 101. Explain it from the very beginning. Go back.
It's like Benghazi. I mean, it's like Sisyphus.
You always have to put up a
start
timeline.
from the beginning.
Unlike Benghazi, though, I am going to disagree with Charles. I think certainly there's been some news that has sucked the oxygen in the last couple of weeks with Christie and other things, but I do think the mainstream media is following this story and has been since the end of the government shutdown.
How much coverage of this document do you think we'll see tomorrow morning?
Well, I'm not sure, but I do think that the story itself about the poor enrollment numbers, the back end problems. I mean, if you're Jay Carney certainly, you think it's pretty well covered. I would argue that it is. The anxiety among Americans is going to increase because it's not their job to stop what they're doing every day and learn about this law. It's only the problem. It's only a problem for them in the way that they experience it, and that's why I think Steve is right that just allowing the system to collapse is going to be eventually irresponsible for Republicans. I think it's fine through this fall, but there is going to be a panic among Americans.
Okay, but what happens if the Senate goes Republican, they have control of the House and the Senate, then what?
And you asked Congressman Price, who has a comprehensive replacement bill, you said, how do you undo this? And the answer is they don't know.
But
and Charles
39
has some principles.
218.
Right, and Charles has some principles, but even he doesn't know how to unwind
Maybe
it.
what has to happen is this, that you reach a point either this year and run up to an election when the Democrats have a majority in the Senate, or next year when, let's assume, they lose a majority, where the Democrats are the ones who say, look, we know this isn't working, particularly the 15 in the states that are red states. We've got to change this. And then they offer to work together with Republicans on a fix, because you have to undo, I mean, all the people who've now been affected.
I mean, how does
in
Hillary
2015,
Clinton,
though,
but
right?
how does Hillary Clinton run for president with the albatross of Obamacare still imploded?
She can't, and I don't think she will.
How does she?
Well, she'll argue that she would have done it differently, and she'll go back.
Yeah, but it's hers when she takes the ball.
A lot of it was hers before she took the ball, before the president did it. I mean, she was in favor of the individual mandate. He opposed it. So I think it's a huge challenge for her. Let me go back to what Charles said just briefly, since he called me insane.
You're leaping to conclusions to put those two things together.
We probably aren't as far apart.
I was not using it in a clinical sense.
Wow, I appreciate that. We probably agree more than we disagree. I mean, I think Republicans have to, at the very least, have the kind of statement of principles that you're talking about. I would say put that in legislation. I mean, often we get legislation that is little more than a statement of principles. Right. It certainly couldn't address all of the different problems. But I think at a certain point you're going to have so there's a sort of a long-term step that Republicans have to take. They should take it, because I think, you know, the issue that Bret raised, what do Republicans say, Republican candidates say in a debate, standing across from a Democrat who says you don't want to do anything, you just want this to collapse. It's not good enough to just say this wasn't ours. I mean, it's true that it wasn't theirs. Right. It's true that Republicans bear no responsibility for it, but that doesn't help. You know, Gretty,
the guy,
the country,
rattle down the
country.
Yeah, you've got to be able to speak to them. And if the problem for Republicans, or one of the problems for Republicans in 2012, was that they were seen as the party that didn't care as much, there's a way to make your arguments in a principled, free market, conservative way, but also convey that you care. It's just that caring doesn't equal another government program, more government money.
Well, then maybe you need to have some kind of idea on what to do with the people who have lost their plans and are now on the exchanges, assuming they're going to be abolished and the whole thing will collapse. Maybe you have a temporary government-run program where for a year they're covered like, what's it called, COBRA, when you lose your job. So maybe you do a big COBRA extension that will cover
with the money coming from future Obamacare allocations, which you could. I've done some reporting.
No, I'm not against that, but I'm saying it'd be hard to predict. But so perhaps one of the things you say in your principle is, and those affected whom we have to now undo and rerun, and I think you could do something like that. The question is, what do you do with insurers who go under, or insurers who pull out, insurers who have, you know, all the schedules. You know, you can't, insurers are not allowed to establish a premium that reflects a person's risk of getting sick.
Right.
It used to be 6 to 1, a 60-year-old had to pay 6 times the premium of a 20-year-old because 60-year-olds incur 6 times as much. The law decrees that the ratio is now 3 to 1, which is insane. And I use that in the clinical sense. So what are they going to do? I suppose once the law's abolished, they're going to return to the old system. But I think I think you're right. You have to build in a cushioning device. But I wouldn't outline a program, because otherwise the debate's going to be about, oh, the Republicans are doing X, Y, and Z, and they're going to pick in details of it. And I think it exposes them in a way that there's no need to be exposed. They were shut out of this, unlike Social Security and civil rights and Medicare, where the opposition was always included. They were shut out of this by an arrogant majority of Democrats, and it's not their job to unwind this.
I don't
Yeah,
think
but when you're on
Americans
the
wanna hear
campaign
that.
trail and you're in the town hall and some guy stands up and says, I lost my insurance, they turned me away from the hospital, what am I going to do?
Okay, we've got a COBRA program that
Yeah, but you have to have the program ready to go. And there's 20 bills out there, but no unity on which one to vote for.
Well, listen to Steve and me and AB and give us an hour and a half.
Coburn and Ryan were working on something before the new year. I had thought that it was going to be unveiled or debated or discussed after the new year. I don't have any idea where it went, but there was sort of activity on the Republican side looking at what they could put together and where they could find some consensus.
I'm going to tell you where it went. I was on the phone with a Republican congressman today for an hour talking about where all these proposals are, because he's on one of them, and there is so much division and so much going on, not only with the immigration reform momentum that's new and controversial, but everything else as they get closer and closer to Republican primaries and the actual election day, that this effort to try to come up with a health care alternative or rhetoric or anything is very tough, and so everything's gone quiet intentionally. And it is too bad, because I think that you're right. I think, Charles, they might be able to get through this this election, but then unless the Democrats come in 15 and say this was horrible, we've got to repair this together, then Republicans are going to be that candidate Bret describes, who's standing there saying to these people who are panicked, the whole country's changed. You've got to get us back. Where's my doctor? And I think they have to have an answer.
You're going to get at some point a critical mass of people who have had serious health problems as a result of canceled insurance policies or the inability to buy the kinds of insurance plans that they wanted. And at that point, Republicans have to, at that point on a human level, you have to want to help something that this dramatic government overreach has directly caused. But on a political level, Republicans are going to have to find a way to address that, or I think it's going to be a huge problem. The irony would be Republicans are in this bind to a certain extent. You're exactly right about the way the president handled this and the stimulus and everything else. He came in as a partisan zealot the day he was elected, and that's how he's operated, I would argue, in the 5 years that he's been in office. But Republicans also lost the opportunity to present their health care plans because they never made health care reform a priority. So at a time when you could have had a more free market reform, the Republicans didn't push it. Now, you can look back at the Bush administration and say, well, obviously there were other things going on, there were other priorities, there were reasons they didn't do it. But they bear some of the blame for not having done this and made it a priority earlier.
I should point out that we have Representative Paul Ryan on the show, the State of the Union show, that night after the President speaks and after the Republican address. We have Senator Rand Paul on as well, so it should be a full night. Charles, final thoughts on this?
Well, look, I think there's one thing Republicans ought to be doing now to hasten the collapse, because it has to collapse. We have to start over, and the faster the better. They need to pass a repeal of the bailout. When you mention the Aetna, the head of Aetna, if they don't have the bailout, the insurers are either going to go bust or they're going to withdraw.
So why isn't that even moving forward? Is there just such pressure from lobbyists that it's just not moving forward?
I don't understand it, other than maybe they're getting pressure from lobbyists, because it's a slam dunk. It's good for the country, it's rational, and how can, and if you tie it to the debt ceiling, then Obama is going to have a tough time issuing a veto, and Harry Reid's going to have a tough time ignoring it. Is Harry Reid going to stand up and say, I'm not going to allow the prevention of a bailout even to come to the floor of the Senate, and at the risk of the credit of the United States, I will let the bailout stand.
More importantly, what is Mary Landrieu going to say? Or
she will bail
Vegas,
on this.
Or Pryor.
They will have to bail. And, there'll be a majority in the Senate for preventing the bailout. Harry Reid would have to stop it in some way. I don't know if he could. He stopped Landrieu when she wanted to introduce the bill that would force the reinstatement of the people who lost their private plans. He didn't allow that to come to the floor. And her bill was stronger than the one that Republicans proposed. But if it gets to the president and he has to veto it, I'd love to hear that speech.
Last word, AB.
Well, I think I don't know what Republicans are going to do. They're very divided, but Democrats are as well. And I think that literally the only line that Democrats, you're going to hear them use this year until they try to survive re-election is they don't have a plan. If it's that bad, they need to come up with one, because I don't think the Democrats are going to stick up for the enrollment numbers, for the demographic breakdown, for the fears of a death spiral, the president's efforts, none of it. I think they're just going to say, we need to fix this together. And I don't think it's going to work. I think Republicans deserve a great midterm election. Democrats, with the approval rating of the president and everything, it's obvious it's going to be a very bad election for Democrats. But that is going to be their response.
Marta 73, why wouldn't Obama just change mid-March deadline to another date, just as he has changed things all along?
Yeah, I mean, he seems to think he can do anything he wants with the health care bill, and there's not much that he's done or tried to do that he's been stopped. I think there are two things to look for in the coming year. One is the potential success of these cases like the Oklahoma case.
There are a number of cases.
Challenging federal subsidies, challenging subsidies to federal exchanges. The second part, I think, is when these Democrats, not just in red states, but primarily in red states, they would be the first ones to flip. When they start really bailing, and by bailing, I mean not just the sort of tiptoeing, careful distance, look, I want to improve this, when they really, when they read a document like the one that Jim reported on earlier tonight, and they say, this is the opposite of what the administration has been telling us, I no longer trust them, I can't bind myself to them any further than I already have, I'm done.
No. Nashville Susie says, thanks for the coverage of the March for Life. I loved Bret's commentary. By the way, that'll be on online on the website, special report. And Mick Bryan says, howdy from southeast Nevada, where it is sunny and 68. That sounds pretty good. That's it for SR Online. Panel, as always, thank you. We'll see you next Wednesday. Control room, little goodbye.